Well, thanks for coming out. Our last night went fast.
Yes.
Past 4 weeks. But thank you for being here with us tonight. There we go. So, as we begin, the topic many people have questioned of the mark of the beast is 666. What does the Bible have to say? Well, in Revelation, John says, I saw a beast coming out of the sea. He had 10 horns and 7 heads with 10 crowns on his horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear, and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was astonished and followed the beast. Men worshipped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshipped the beast and asked, who is like the beast? Who can make war against him? The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise his authority for 42 months. He opened his mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name in his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. He was given power to make war against the saints and to conquer them. And he was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the book of life, belonging to the Lamb that was slain from the creation of the world. This calls for wisdom. If anyone has insight, let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is man's number. His number is 666, or 666. So who is this beast? As we go into Revelation 13, we'll look at some of the identifying marks of who is this beast and what does he represent and how does it affect us today. But let's remind ourselves, we looked at this before, every country has some dark parts of history. Some parts that they wish had never taken place. Germany, with what happened in World War II with Hitler and Nazism and the atrocities that take place there. Japan, in World War II with their attack of Pearl Harbor, I'm sure they wish it would have never happened. And even here in America, there's parts that happen in our history that we look back on and wish it had never taken place. The way we treated the Native Americans as we were settling this land and pushing them off of the land that they had lived on for thousands of years. The way we treated slaves. Took a civil war to end slavery in this country. And the way we treated the Japanese during World War II with internment camps. So every country has parts of its history that I'm sure it wish would have never taken place. Well, the church does too. The church has parts of its history that were not its finest moments. And that's what we're going to focus in on tonight as we look back and as we look into the future. So let's look at some of the identifying points of this beast. Number one, it came out of the sea. It tells us in Revelation 13:1, the dragon stood on the shore of the sea. Now, letting the Bible interpret itself, we see that Revelation 17 says the waters are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. And so waters represents a heavily populated area. So water represents people. So where this beast arises in a heavily populated area where many people are living. Number two, it is a religious power. Okay? It is a religious power. Now, why would we say this is a religious power? Because it tells us in verse 8, all inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the book of life belonging to the Lamb that was slain from the creation of the world. So we'd only worship a religious power. So this is worship is involved, so this involves some kind of religious power. Next, number three, it receives its power from the great red dragon. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. So it receives its power from this great red dragon. So who is the great red dragon? Ultimately, according to Revelation 12, it tells us the great dragon was that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan who leads the whole world astray. So Satan is the great red dragon, but Satan works through other powers. He never comes as himself. So looking back in Revelation 12, we see that then another sign appeared in heaven. An enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. So the dragon has 7 heads, 10 crowns, and 7 crowns. After Rome fell apart and was divided among 10 nations, 7 nations are now in existence today. 3 of these nations were overthrown. So 7 heads, 10 horns, but ends up with 7 crowns on its head. And it tells us that it stood in front of the woman. And she gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ stepped down from heaven and came down to this earth. Came in the form of a child. And when he came to this earth, here God himself had stepped down to be among us. Most people didn't pay any attention. A few shepherds came to visit him. A few wise men from a distant land came to visit him. But as they were searching for him, they stopped in Jerusalem and asked, "Where is this child that is to be born a king?" Well, Herod was ruling there. And when he heard there was a child born that would be a king, he was jealous and feared for his throne. And so he told them to go find this child in Bethlehem, come back and let him know where he's at so they could worship, so he could worship him. He had no intentions of worshiping this child. He was seeking to take his life. Well, the wise men were warned to go home in a different direction, not return to Herod. And so Herod did not receive word where this child was. And the Bible says when Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious. And he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. So Herod did not find out. But here was Rome trying to take the life of Jesus the moment he was born. But God was with his son, and he escaped till eventually, through the Roman power, through the Roman government, Jesus' life was taken as he was crucified at the hands of the Romans. But he was snatched up to God and to his throne, the Bible said. Placed in a tomb, but 3 days later he came forth from that tomb, and now he lives in heaven alive forevermore. So the great red dragon represents Satan, but it is Satan that works through the Roman government. Satan works through governments to accomplish his people and overthrowing God's people. So here was Rome trying to take the life of Christ the moment he was born, and eventually did take his life, but he returned to heaven with his Father. So it's Satan working through the Roman government. Number 4, this dragon, this Roman government, gave its authority to the beast. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. So what does history tell us? The popes filled the place of the vacant emperors at Rome, inheriting their power, prestige, and titles from paganism. Constantine left all to the bishop of Rome. As the Rome started to fall apart, they turned toward religious power to rule them. Long ages ago, when Rome, through neglect of the Western emperors, was left to the mercy of the barbarous hordes, the Romans turned to one figure for aid and protection and asked him to rule them, and thus commenced the temporal sovereignty of the popes. So they turned the government of Rome, turned their power over to the church. And out of the ruins of the Roman Empire, there gradually arose a new order of states whose central point was the papal see. Therefore, inevitably, resulted a position not only new, but very different from the former. Instead of a civil power, you now have a religious power. It receives its power from the Roman government, from the Roman authorities. Now, as we go through this prophecy, this first half of this prophecy tonight, let's pause and make sure we understand something. As we talk about this church, we are not talking about the individuals who make up the church. We're talking about an organization. The organization came to power. As we shall see, power corrupted God's church. It is not the individuals we're talking about. Many Catholics love Jesus Christ. They're sincere in their worship of Him. They will be going to heaven to live with Him when Jesus returns. So we're not talking about the individuals. We're talking about the organization and what went wrong with the Church of God. So let's keep that in mind as we go through this. Number 5, the whole world will be astonished by the beast, it says. The whole world was astonished and followed the beast. The word Catholic itself means universal. They boast of their membership worldwide of 700 million members in this church. And have you ever seen any religious leader, the whole world watches him. Everywhere he goes, people are there, the newscast is there, world leaders, regardless of their beliefs or their backgrounds, want to meet with the Pope. The whole world watch. Let him make a statement, and it is news. It's in the papers, it's in our newscast. The whole world watches. Everybody is astonished by this power. Thousands will flock out. When he came here to America, thousands came out just to see him as he drove by. All the world watches. Everyone is astonished. Number 6, this beast spoke blasphemies, we are told. He speaks blasphemies. It says to us, the beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies. He opened his mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. Now, the Bible has 2 definitions of what blasphemy is. One is found in John chapter 10. Jesus was doing a good work. He was healing people, and he told people they were forgiven. So at one point, Jesus would claim that he was the Son of God. And so they were ready to stone him. So Jesus asked, why? And they said, for a good work we do not stone you, but for blasphemy, and because you, being a man, make yourself God. So one of the biblical definitions of blasphemy is when a man makes himself God. Man is a created being. We are not gods. So when a man tries to make himself God, the Bible said that was blasphemy. They looked at Jesus, they felt he was just another man like them. When he would claim to be the Son of God, they would say, that's blasphemy. You're just a man. You cannot be the Son of God. So blasphemy is a man making himself God. Look at what they had said. As the church came to power, Pope Leo XIII said, we hold upon this earth the place of God Almighty. So they felt they held the place of God himself. Ferraris' Ecclesiastical Dictionary stated, the Pope is of so great dignity and so exalted that he is not a mere man, but as it were God and the vicar of God. So he's not just a person, he's not just a man. This is blasphemy, he's making himself God. Fifth Lateran Council stated, for thou art the shepherd, thou art the physician, thou art the director, thou art the husbandman, finally, thou art another God on earth. Oh. This would speak blasphemy, man making himself God. Second definition of blasphemy is in Luke 5. Jesus would tell people their sins were forgiven. So they would say, who is this fellow who speaks blasphemy? Who can forgive sins but God alone? They did not see Jesus as God, and when he'd say someone's sins are forgiven, they said that is blasphemy. So blasphemy is when a man believes he can forgive sins. And only God has the right to forgive sins, and when man tries to do so, the Bible states that is blasphemy. Here's what they said in the church. God himself is obliged to abide by the judgment of his priest, and either to not to pardon or to pardon, according as they refuse or give absolution. The sentence of the priest precedes, and God subscribes to it. So, whatever they decide, if they be forgiven or not forgiven, God will abide by the decision of his priest. Again, they say, seek where you will, through heaven and earth, and you will find but one created being who can forgive the sinner. That extraordinary being is the priest, the Catholic priest. So that's considered blasphemy in the Bible. Man does not have the right to forgive or not to forgive. That belongs to God. Point number 7. The beast exercises his authority for 42 months. The beast was given his authority for 42 months, the Bible said. So 42 months. How long would that be? Well, let's remember, in prophetic time prophecy, a day is equal to a year. According to Ezekiel 4:6, I have assigned you a day for each year. So in time prophecy, a day equals a year. It doesn't mean everywhere the Bible speaks of a day, that's automatically a year. That's only when we're dealing with time prophecy, a day equals a year. So a prophetic month is 30 days. 30 times 42 would be 1,260 prophetic days, or 1,260 years. So this power would be in existence, in control, for a period of 1,260 years. Okay? Vigilius ascended the papal chair in 538 AD under the military protection of Belisarius. Belisarius gave the authority of the church over to Vigilius in 538 AD. So the legally recognized supremacy of the church began in 538 AD, when there went into effect a decree of Emperor Justinian making the Bishop of Rome head over all the churches, the definer of doctrine, and the corrector of heretics. The problem, it didn't stop with defining doctrine. As their power grew, they started to define laws and put kings on the throne and take kings off the throne. And under him was very nearly made good the papal claim that all earthly sovereigns were merely vassals of the Roman pontiff. Almost all the kings and princes of Europe swore fealty to him as their overlord. And that's what happened. If they wanted a king on the throne, the church would put him there. If they wanted him off the throne, they could take him off the throne. If they wanted a law passed, the kings passed the law. So their power began to grow and increase. And not only ruling the church, they also began to rule the state. That started in 538 AD. 1,260 years, the 42 prophetic months, this church would be in power until 1798. Which brings us to point number 8. It makes war with the saints. He was given power to make war against the saints and to conquer them. As the church came to power, instead of being persecuted, of all things, the church began to persecute anyone who would not agree or go along with their teachings. We have this statement: the church may by divine right confiscate property of heretics. Heretic is anyone who doesn't agree with the church teachings. Imprison their persons and condemn them to the flames. In our age, the right to inflict the severest penalties, even death, belongs to the church. There is no graver offense than heresy, therefore it must be rooted out. Church comes to power, power corrupts the church, and they begin to persecute anyone who would not follow the teachings of the church. Western Watchman, a Catholic journal, states the church has persecuted. Only a tyro, which means a beginner, in church history will deny that. Thousands lost their lives at the hands of the church. But eventually, point number 9, one head was to have a fatal wound. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. So when did the church receive a fatal wound? It started in 538 AD and came to power. 1,260 years would bring it to 1798. Till the murder of a Frenchman in Rome in 1798 gave the French an excuse for occupying the eternal city and putting an end to the papal temporal power. 1798, Napoleon is seeking to establish the French Empire. Had nothing to do with Christianity or religion. This was the age of reason. When a Frenchman is murdered in Rome, that gave him the excuse he needed to march into Rome. The aged pontiff himself was carried off into exile into Valence. The enemies of the church rejoiced. The last pope, they declared, had reigned. Finally, someone stood up for the church. The head of the church was taken prisoner. Pope Pius VI was sent into exile. He died in exile some 18 months later. But the church received a fatal wound when the head of its church was taken off and not allowed to lead and rule any longer. But point number 10 reminds us the fatal wound is to be healed. But the fatal wound has been healed, Revelation 13 verse 3 tells us. When did that happen? The Roman question tonight was a thing in the past, and the Vatican was at peace with Italy. Now notice the wording the San Francisco Chronicle used for this event. In affixing the autographs to the memorable document healing the wound, extreme cordiality was displayed on both sides. In 1929, the fatal wound to the head was healed. In 1929, when the Vatican was restored to its rights as a nation. That was taken away. But in 1929, Mussolini gave that back. The church became a nation within a nation. Its own country within a country, the fatal wound was healed. Wife and I visited over in the Vatican. And we're on a tour bus, and as we're going in, the tour guide said to us, now listen, here's this big wall. We're entering the Vatican. If you break any laws, you are on your own. They have their own courts, they have their own police. If you get in trouble, there is nothing we can do for you. You're on your own. So it's a country within a country. You know, it's its own nation. And in 1929, it was reestablished as its own nation when Mussolini gave it back. The fatal wound was healed. Number 11. The beast has a number, a man's number. The beast has a number, a man's number. This calls for wisdom. If anyone has insight, let him calculate the number of the beast. For this man's number, his number is 666. Now notice what it says in this text. It is man's number. It does not say it is a Social Security card number. It does not say in this text it is a barcode on your store items. It does not say it is a number on our credit cards. It is very specific, and it says it is a man's number. And his number is 666, 666. Now this is a Roman power, okay? There's a question in our Sunday Visitor. What are the letters inscribed in the Pope's crown, and what do they signify, if anything? Their answer. The letters inscribed in the Pope's mitre are these, Vicarius Filii, which is Latin for Vicar of the Son of God. So inside this mitre that the Pope wears is supposed to be these letters, Vicarius Filii, okay? Now this is a Roman power. If you assign Roman numerals to this title, here's what you get. A V is a 5. In Roman numerals, an I is a 1. A C in Roman numerals is 100. No A, there's no R. An I is a 1. A U and a V are interchangeable. That's a 5. There's no S. You add those together, that's 112. There's no F in Roman numerals. I is 1 and L is 50 in Roman numerals. I and I is 1. You add those together, it's 53. The D in Roman numerals is 500. There is no E. An I is a 1. Add those together, it's 501. You add this title all together, and here's what you get. 666, a man's number, we are told. Okay? So it is a man's number, the prophecy tells us. You need me to wait a minute before I go further while you write this down. I see some writing, so I'll wait. Okay, so it doesn't say anything about barcodes or Social Security cards or credit cards or anything. It is the number of a man, and this title adds up to his number of 666. Okay, so that's the first beast. But there's a second beast talked about in Revelation 13. This is what happened to the church when the church came to power. And the first half of Revelation 13 is when the church and state combined and the church began to rule. They put kings on the throne, they took them off, they made laws. But then Revelation 13 points out a second beast is seen. John says, then I saw another beast coming out of the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb, but he spoke like a dragon. So now comes a second beast, unlike the first one, but he says it has two horns like a lamb, but this beast speaks like a dragon. So this beast arises to power sometime after the first beast. Okay? So the first beast ended in 1798 when the Pope was taken off out of the church in exiles. But this is a second beast, comes after this first beast. Next, this beast arises out of the earth. Then I saw another beast coming out of the earth, John says in verse 11. So this next beast, second beast, is out of the earth. Now remember the first beast that came out of the sea. And the waters represent peoples and multitudes and nations and languages, a heavily populated area. This one comes out of the earth. So the earth would be just the opposite. It is an unpopulated area. And this one, right? So it comes after the first beast and arises in an unpopulated area, we are told. Next, his power is different from the previous beast. So this is different from what comes before it. He has two horns like a lamb. So this is different from anything before it. So this is a different type of beast. Horns are a symbol of power. On these horns there are no crowns. There are no kingly authority. What power was arising around 1798 in an unpopulated area without a king? What we're looking at here in this second beast is the United States of America. Came after the first beast, which ended in 1798, grows up in an unpopulated area. We are founded on a principle of democracy. We do not have a king in this country. People were made, when they were settling this land, they were going to make sure we would never have a king. This is different from what came before it. The beast has two horns like a lamb, but he speaks like a dragon. He has two horns like a lamb, he's told, but he spoke like a dragon. Now, the dragon was, Satan working through earthly governments, accomplishing his purpose. We are founded upon the principle of religious freedom. We have in our amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Jesus Christ never forced his will upon people. He invited people, he gave them an invitation to follow him, but he never forced his will upon anybody. We were founded upon that principle. Many fled to this country for religious freedom. We have in our declaration the statement, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Government belongs to the people. We are democracy. We were founded on those principles, religious freedom and democracy. That's what we were founded upon. But it tells us he exercised all the authority of the first beast on his behalf and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast whose fatal wound had been healed. One day the United States will begin to speak like a dragon. The central issue regarding the mark of the beast is worship. Central issue, as we look at this power that's going to rise, will be that of worship. Why do I say that? Revelation 14, verse 7 tells that we are to worship the Creator. God is the one who made us. He's the only one who deserves our worship. 14, verse 9, God tells us you do not worship the beast under any circumstances. Revelation 14:12, we're reminded that we're to keep the commandments of God and keep the faith of Jesus Christ. But one day, that's going to change. There are only two commandments that even discuss the issue of worship. The second commandment, do not worship images. And the fourth commandment, worship God on the Sabbath. Only those two commandments discuss worship. Okay? Second one talks about images. The fourth one, the Sabbath. The second one says, you shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. The second commandment, you shall not worship any images. The fourth commandment, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your manservant or maidservant, nor your animals, nor the alien within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Do not worship images. Worship God on the seventh day Sabbath. But it tells us, in this power, he will deceive the inhabitants of the earth. He ordered them to set up an image, breaking the second commandment, in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. He was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that it could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. He also forced everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead, so that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark. This is a religious boycott. People will not be able to buy or to sell. Thomas Jefferson stated this: all persons shall have full and free liberty of religious opinion, nor shall any be compelled to frequent or maintain any religious institution. That is what our country is founded upon. But one day, church and state will unite to enforce the religious practices. What I see happening in Revelation 13 is that here's what went wrong with God's church when it came to power, and power corrupted it, and church and state combined. And God is showing us in the second piece, it's going to happen again, and the United States will be the leader when this takes place, and church and state will once again come together. William Rehnquist said this: the wall of separation between church and state is a metaphor based on bad history. He's right. When church and state combined, it was bad history. It was not good when it happened. Pat Robertson has said, the separation of church and state was never in the Constitution. However much the liberals laugh at me for saying it, they know good and well it was never in the Constitution. Such language only appeared in the Constitution of the communists. So he is very much for bringing church and state together. Look at this statement. I don't believe in an America where the separation of church and state are absolute. The idea that the church can have no influence or no involvement in the operation of the state is absolutely antithetical to the objectives and vision of our country. To say that people of faith have no role in the public square, you bet that makes me want to throw up. Friends, it is not good for church and state to come together. And watching the news this week, that now churches can endorse any candidate that they want, you wonder, okay, where is this going to lead to? Where are we headed with this? Allies in a cultural war. I saw this article. Can Catholics and evangelicals use their common ground to become political partners? They said, doctrinal differences among religious Americans are less important than cultural antagonisms between secular liberals and serious believers of all faiths. In today's cultural wars, conservatives in both religious camps have discovered certain common concerns: opposition to abortion, support of parental choice, and a shared sense of persecution in public life. What they are saying, our country, our world is plagued by war and drugs and rising crime, natural disasters, sexual immorality is out of control, economic uncertainty. Churches are saying today, we need to put our differences aside doctrinally and come together and unite on what we have in common, and that is we have got to take care of the problems of our world. So we need to unite and pass laws to get people back in church where they belong. March 2015, Senator Sylvia Allen was addressing the Senate over gun control. Listen to what she said. "It is the soul that is corrupt, and how we get it back to a moral rebirth in this country, I don't know, since we are slowly eroding religion at every opportunity we have. Probably, we should be debating a bill requiring every American to attend church of their choice on Sunday." So she stated that in the Senate. When she was confronted, she said, "I don't even know what the problem is with what I said. We need to be back in the churches. If people aren't going, we need to force them back." Listen to what Glenn Beck is saying. Beck is encouraging individuals to get involved by calling their senators and letting them know that we are all Catholics now. The issue at hand is not about contraception as it has been framed by many media outlets, he says. Instead, it is a religious freedom issue that hinges upon the separation of church and state's mandate that the government not force churches to violate their values and principles. Here is his directions for getting involved and making an impact. Call the Capitol and speak with your senator. Now notice what you're to say. When you call, be sure to tell them, we are all Catholics now. This key phrase will let them know you are a part of a larger organized movement working in support of religious freedom. Religious freedom is not forcing people in the church or forcing them to believe like you believe or I believe. That's not religious freedom. Justice William O. Douglas said, "It seems to be plain that by these laws the states compel one under the sanction of law to refrain from work or recreation on Sunday because of the majority's views on that day. The state law makes Sunday a symbol of respect or adherence." So what's he saying here? He's saying we need to go with what the majority of the people believe. The majority worship on Sunday, and that's the day we should be enforcing upon people to worship. This mark of Sunday keeping is one day going to become law. How it come about, I can't tell you. But the Bible is pointing that one day this power, this country that rose up like a lamb, religious freedom belongs to all. You can worship God, not worship God, that is up to us, is going to turn 180, go completely opposite and begin to speak like a dragon. Church and state will unite, and what happened in the Dark Ages is going to happen again. God warned us in Revelation 13, this is what happened, and it will repeat itself. Look at this. 250 bishops met in Rome for a conference on the movement called the New Evangelization, which focuses on reawakening faith in those already baptized. So the Catholic Church came, we got many people, many members, but they're not coming to church. What do? One of their conclusions was, even though there is a tension between the Christian Sunday and the secular Sunday, Sunday needs to be recovered. We need to get people in church where they belong. To get control of the crime and immorality throughout our land. Responding to the question, do we need to rediscover the meaning of leisure? Pope Francis replies, together with a culture of work, there must be a culture of leisure as gratification. To put it another way, people who work must take time to relax, to be with their families, to enjoy themselves, read, listen to music, play a sport. But this is being destroyed in large part by the elimination of the Sabbath rest day. Now, when he says Sabbath rest day, he's not talking about Saturday that we looked at in the Bible. He goes on to say, more and more people work on Sundays as a consequence of the competitiveness imposed by a consumer society. In such cases, he concludes, work ends up dehumanizing people. What his point was, the Bible tells us to rest on Sabbath, which he calls Sunday, and we need to get people back to resting on that day. Get them out of the ballparks, get them out of the race car tracks, getting them in the church where they belong. Friends, this union of church and state was a threat to the freedom during the Dark Ages. It will be a threat to our freedom in the future. Judge Roy Moore, Chief Justice of Alabama Supreme Court, says, "The state carries the power of the sword. That is, the power to prohibit conduct with physical penalties, such as confinement and even execution. It must use that power to prevent the subversion of children towards this lifestyle, to not encourage a criminal lifestyle." He was debating against homosexuality. The church has the right to wield the sword if it needs to bring this under control. The Catholic record stated, Sunday is our mark of authority. The church is above the Bible, and this transference of Sabbath observance is proof of that fact. They admit they chose the day of worship from Saturday over to Sunday. They have the right to do so, they claim, by the very act of doing this. The Bible says, "Remember that thou keep holy the Sabbath day." The Catholic Church says, "No. By my divine power, I abolish the Sabbath day and command you to keep holy the first day of the week." And lo, the entire civilized world bows down in reverent obedience to the command of the Holy Catholic Church. Their own words, their own statement by Father Enright, that the world follows what the church teaches. This statement came out, this next statement came out of a Catholic newsletter that was sent out. "I did not write this." Notice what he states. "Perhaps the boldest thing, the most revolutionary change the church ever did happened in the first century. The holy day, the Sabbath, was changed from Saturday to Sunday, not from any directions noted in the Scriptures, but from the church's sense of its own power. People who think that the Scripture should be the sole authority should logically become Seventh-day Adventists to keep Saturday holy." I did not make this up or write. A Catholic church sent this out to its members, and that's what they stated. The church changed the day of worship from Saturday to Sunday. The Bible teaches Saturday. God never gave any church the right to do so. Is it a literal or a symbolic mark? Well, it's a symbolic beast. It represents a religious power. It's a symbolic image. It's a symbolic name. It's a symbolic number. It's a symbolic seal. It's a symbolic mark. It's not people when we're running around with 666 tattooed on their foreheads or in their hand. In the forehead means, I am convinced it is right. There will be some people, church and state will combine, they will pass laws. They honestly believe this is the right thing to do. In the hand, some people may not believe it, but why rock the boat? Let's just go along with it. Why call attention to ourselves? Or they're forced into it, so they just do it. No? So in the forehead just means they're convinced it's right. In the hand just means they may not be convinced it's right, but they just go along with it anyway. They don't stand up against us. This beast is not a person. It is a religious political system that we are looking at, of the church trying once again to control the state and pass its laws according to its dictates. Does anyone have the mark of the beast today? Make sure you understand this very plainly. Do not go away from here saying that that pastor said everyone who worships on Sunday has the mark of the beast. That is not what I'm stating here. No one today has the mark of the beast. No one. People are worshiping on Sunday. Many of them are worshiping on Sunday because they love Jesus Christ. They have a relationship with Him. No one has the mark of the beast today. And no one will receive the mark of the beast until religious legislation is passed enforcing the substitute Sabbath. When it becomes a law, and the church begins to pass laws that go against what the Bible teaches, and anyone who goes along with that, then they receive the mark of the beast. But no one has the mark of the beast today. God gives one of the harshest warnings in the Bible against receiving this mark. He warns us. It's like He's shouting at us. God warns against this mark of the beast. He says, a third angel said with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast in his image and receives his mark on his forehead or in his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of His indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever, and they have no rest, day or night, who worship the beast in his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. It is as if God is shouting us, whatever you do not worship the beast, do not receive his mark, stay away from it. Revelation 13:16 tells us he forced everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead. The issue here is forced worship. If government was to make a law that everyone had to start worshiping on Saturday, Seventh-day Adventists would be one of the first ones to stand up against it. We do not believe in forced worship. That's the problem here, this forced worship. You know? And that's not how God works. God never uses force. He invites us. This is an invitation. Jesus would invite people to follow him, but when they walked away, he didn't run them down and beat them up. You know? He gave them the freedom to follow or walk away. God never uses force. He says, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him and he with me. He doesn't knock the door down. He just knocks on the door. We have to open it. The problem here is forced worship. That's not God's way. That is the way of the dragon. Jesus said, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. It's truth that sets people free. It's truth that brings people to God. It's truth in a relationship with God. Revelation 14 says, this calls for patient endurance on the part of the saints who obey God's commandments and remain faithful to Jesus. God is calling us to obey the commandments that he has given to us because they're leading us into a relationship with him and a relationship with one another, and he calls us to remain faithful to Jesus Christ. Keep our relationship with him faithful. So that's what he's calling us for today, to obey him, to follow him, to love him, and to serve him. In the future, the final issue of loyalty will center around worship. Who are we loyal to? Who are we going to worship? Are we going to go with the dictates of the country? Or are we going to go with what the Bible teaches us and what God asks of us? Jesus Christ died on the cross for us. He died on that cross saying how much he loves us. He loves everyone on this earth more than life itself. While we were still sinners, God died for us there on that cross. And now he tells us, if you love me, keep my commandments. That's what it's all about. It's a love relationship between us and God. We obey him because we love him, because we want to follow him, because we want to obey him. And we want to put Jesus Christ first in our lives. And God will have a group that overcomes this mark. John says, I saw something like a sea of glass mingled with fire, and those who have the victory over the beast, over his image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name, standing on the sea of glass, having the harps of God. God will have a group that overcome this and do not receive the mark. They are the 144,000. They're sealed by God. And that's what we're going to look at in the next session, who they are. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the warnings you give us. You warned us of what went wrong in the church when it came to power, and you're warning us what will happen when it takes place again. We are called to bring people to Jesus Christ, not force them to follow you. And may we, through our lives, through our witness, through our testimony, through our words, share the good news of Jesus Christ, and people see how much he loves and cares for them. And may we put Jesus first and stand for him alone. We pray in his name. Amen.